The night arrived on velvet wings, soft and deep, drawing a veil of indigo over the city's distant hum. Ilar stood by the tall, arched window of her penthouse apartment, a goblet of amber liquid cradled in her hand. The skyline, usually a glittering tapestry of defiant light, seemed to have hushed its vibrancy, mirroring the quiet anticipation that hummed beneath her skin. A single lamp cast a golden pool, a Persian rug behind her, illuminating the rich textures of the room. Polished mahogany, antique brass, and the heavy drape of damask curtains that awaited her command to shut out the world entirely. Tonight was different. Every fiber of her being acknowledged it, from the subtle tremor in her fingertips to the quickening pulse at the base of her throat. It wasn't merely another evening, it was the evening. A promise whispered between shadows and remembered in a touch that had lingered far too long. She took a slow sip of the aged scotch, letting its warmth unfurl a delicate fire within her. It was a drink she rarely indulged in, reserved for moments that demanded a certain gravitas, a certain courage. And tonight, she needed both. Her reflection in the darkened glass showed a woman on the precipice, elegant, composed, yet with eyes that held a liquid depth, hinting at the storm brewing beneath the calm surface. Her dark hair, usually meticulously coiffed, was left to fall in soft waves around her shoulders, a deliberate loosening of her usual impeccable control. She wore a silk robe, the color of claret wine, its fabric a whisper against her skin, hinting at the curves beneath without revealing them. The apartment itself seemed to breathe with a silent expectancy. The scent of sandalwood and jasmine, diffused from a discreet burner, mingled with the faint, metallic tang of the city air, creating an intoxicating perfume that promised secrets and profound pleasures. She had chosen the music carefully, a low, soulful jazz that wove its intricate melodies through the space, a seductive prelude to the symphony she hoped the night would become. Ilara moved away from the window, her bare feet sinking into the plush rug. Her path led her to the ensuite bathroom, a sanctuary of marble and muted light. The bath had already been drawn, the water steaming gently, infused with essential oils, bergamot and ylang-ylang scents, known for their soothing yet aphrodisiac qualities. Rose petals, a lavish extravagance, floated on the surface, their crimson deepening to almost black in the soft glow. She shed her robe, letting it pool around her ankles like a silken shadow. For a moment, she stood naked, allowing the cool air to kiss her skin, a shiver running through her that was not from cold. Her body, sculpted by discipline and grace, was a landscape of soft curves and subtle strength. She closed her eyes, breathing in the fragrant steam, and then stepped into the waiting warmth. The water enveloped her, a luxurious embrace that eased the slight tension in her shoulders, the tremor in her heart. She sank lower, until the water lapped at her chin, the rose petals drifting against her skin like gentle kisses. This ritual of cleansing was more than physical. It was a shedding of the day, of the world's demands, preparing herself for a different kind of encounter. She scrubbed her skin with a loofah infused with sea salt, feeling the gentle friction, awakening every nerve ending. Then she rinsed, letting the water wash away the last vestiges of her self-imposed composure, leaving her feeling exquisitely vulnerable, exquisitely alive. When she emerged, her skin glowed, flushed and scented. She wrapped herself in a large, fluffy towel, then reached for a bottle of rich body cream, massaging it slowly into her arms, her legs, her décolletage. Each stroke was deliberate, sensual, a silent prayer to the night and the man she awaited. She brushed her hair until it shone, a dark cascade framing her face, then left it loose, unconstrained. Returning to the bedroom, she paused. The large four-poster bed, draped in sheer silk netting, seemed to beckon. The sheets were of the finest Egyptian cotton, cool and crisp, a stark contrast to the thick velvet duvet folded at the foot. Velvet. The word itself was a caress, a promise of plush depths and hidden passions. It was the texture of dreams, of clandestine touches, of exquisite surrender. Her gaze drifted to the bedside table, where a single crimson rose lay on a silver tray beside a small, intricately carved wooden box. She knew what was inside. She lifted the lid, revealing a delicate vial of perfume, custom blended for her. Its scent a complex symphony of amber, musk, and a hint of something wild and untamed. She dabbed it behind her ears, on her wrists, at the hollow of her throat, letting the fragrance meld with her own warmed skin. It was an invitation, a silent declaration. As if on cue, a soft, insistent chime echoed through the apartment. Her breath hitched. He was here? A wave of nerves, sharp and exhilarating, crashed over her. She took a deep, steadying breath, willing herself to reclaim her composure. This was Julian. The man who had haunted her thoughts for months, whose gaze held a silent language only she understood, whose touch, when it had been allowed, had ignited a spark that refused to be extinguished. Their connection was a slow-burning fire, meticulously tended, painstakingly controlled, until tonight. Tonight, the dam would break. She walked to the door, her movements fluid, graceful, betraying none of the tremor within. Her hand hesitated on the cold brass of the doorknob. This was it. The crossing of a threshold, a passage into uncharted territory. She opened it. He stood there, framed by the soft glow of the hallway lights, a vision that stole her breath and settled it somewhere deep in her chest. Julian Y. Taller than she remembered, broader in the shoulders, yet with a lean elegance that spoke of understated power. He wore a dark suit, impeccably tailored, its charcoal fabric a stark contrast to the crisp white shirt beneath, open just enough to reveal a hint of tan skin at his throat. His dark hair was slightly disheveled, as if he'd run a frustrated hand through it moments before, adding to his already potent appeal. But it was his eyes that held her captive, a startling shade of hazel, flecked with gold, that seemed to pierce through her carefully constructed facade, seeing directly into the raw heart of her desire. A slow smile, dangerously charming, curved his lips. "Elara," he murmured, his voice a low rumble that vibrated through the floorboards and directly into her core. It was richer, deeper than she remembered, imbued with a hint of something primal. She found her voice, a little breathless. "Julian, you're punctual." He chuckled, a sound that was both intimate and knowing. "I wouldn't dream of being anything else, not tonight." His gaze swept over her, taking in the soft waves of her hair, the flushed skin, the silken robe that clung to her curves like a second skin. His eyes lingered for a fraction too long on the dip of her collarbone, and a thrilling warmth spread through her. "Come in," she managed, stepping aside to allow him entry. He moved into the apartment, bringing with him the subtle scent of expensive cologne, rain-kissed earth, and something uniquely his, a clean, masculine aroma that made her senses swim. The jazz music seemed to swell, embracing his presence, deepening the atmosphere of sensual anticipation. He paused just inside, surveying the room. "You've transformed this place," he said, his voice softer now, laced with appreciation. "It feels like a different world." "I wanted it to," she replied, her gaze meeting his, holding. "Tonight, I wanted to step outside of the ordinary." He turned fully to her then, his eyes burning into hers. "And I believe you have succeeded." He took a step closer, then another, until they were standing mere inches apart. The air between them crackled with an unspoken energy, a palpable tension that was almost unbearable, almost exquisite. She could feel the warmth radiating from his body, smell the faint scent of his skin beneath the cologne. "Elara," he said again, his voice barely a whisper, a rough caress. He didn't touch her. Not yet. But the intensity of his gaze was a physical touch, stroking her skin, tracing the line of her jaw, the curve of her lip. "You look breathtaking." A flush deepened on her cheeks. She felt utterly exposed, despite the silk covering her. His approval, his admiration, was a powerful aphrodisiac. "Julian," she responded, her own voice barely audible, "you don't look so bad yourself." A playful spark ignited in her eyes, a challenge and an invitation. He smiled, a genuine open smile that crinkled the corners of his eyes, and sent a jolt of pure pleasure through her. I aim to impress. He reached out, slowly, his fingers tracing the delicate line of her jaw, his touch feather-light, yet leaving a trail of fire in its wake. And you, my dear, have outdone yourself. His thumb brushed over her lower lip, soft and teasing, sending a shiver through her entire body. Her lips parted slightly, a silent invitation. She wanted to lean into his touch, to press herself against him, to feel the solid reality of his body against hers. But something held her back, a delicious reluctance, a desire to prolong this exquisite agony of anticipation. I imagine you've had a long day, she murmured, her voice husky. He dropped his hand, though his eyes never left hers, the intensity of his gaze unwavering. Longer than usual, but every moment was worth it, knowing it would lead me here. He took another step, closing the last remaining distance between them. Now, she could feel the heat of him, the faint warmth of his breath on her face. I prepared a drink for you, she offered, gesturing vaguely towards the living area. It was a weak attempt to regain some semblance of control, to inject a mundane action into the charged atmosphere. He shook his head, his eyes still locked on hers. Not yet? First? His gaze dropped to her mouth, lingered there, then slowly, deliberately, rose back to meet her eyes. First, I need to know this is real. His hand reached out again, this time cupping her cheek, his palm warm against her skin. His thumb stroked gently, sending a wave of electric sensation through her. Her breath caught in her throat. She could feel the faint tremor in his hand, mirroring her own. It's real, Julian, she whispered, her voice barely a thread. More real than anything. His head lowered, slowly, agonizingly slowly. Her eyes fluttered shut, her heart hammering against her ribs. She felt the brush of his lips against hers, a whisper-like touch that promised everything and delivered nothing, yet. It was a tantalizing tease, a breath of pure longing. He pulled back fractionally, just enough for their breaths to mingle, for her to feel the warmth of his desire. "Velvet dreams," he murmured, his voice a low, seductive rasp, his lips brushing hers with each word. "Is that what you dreamt of tonight, Alara?" Her answer was lost as his mouth finally claimed hers, not with a forceful demand, but with a deep, lingering tenderness that was infinitely more potent. It was a kiss that tasted of scotch and jasmine, of long-held desires and unspoken promises finally given voice. His lips were soft, yet firm, exploring the contours of hers with an exquisite gentleness that belied the burning passion she felt radiating from him. She felt herself melt into him, her hands rising to grip the lapels of his jacket, clinging to him, as if he were the only solid thing in a world suddenly made liquid. The kiss deepened, slowly, exquisitely. His tongue traced the seam of her lips, a silent question, and she answered by parting them, granting him entry. He explored the soft cavern of her mouth, with a leisurely grace that drove her wild, a slow, sensual dance that mirrored the rhythm of her racing heart. She tasted him, the clean, masculine taste that was uniquely Julian, intoxicating and addictive. A soft moan escaped her throat, a sound she barely recognized as her own. She leaned into him, pressing her body against his, feeling the hard planes of his chest, the tautness of his thighs. Her fingers tightened on his jacket, pulling him closer still, desperate for more. He responded instantly, his arms wrapping around her waist, pulling her flush against him, until there was no space left between them. His kiss became more fervent, more demanding, a fiery declaration of the desire that had simmered between them for so long. She felt a delicious weakness spread through her limbs, her knees threatening to buckle. She was lost in the moment, in the intoxicating sensation of his mouth on hers, his body pressed against hers, the world outside fading into an irrelevant blur. He broke the kiss at last reluctantly, pulling back just enough to rest his forehead against hers. Their breaths were ragged, their hearts pounding in unison. His eyes, dark with passion, searched hers, seeking confirmation, seeking reassurance. "Ilara," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. You have no idea how long I've waited for this. She looked up at him, her own eyes shining with unshed tears, tears of pure, unadulterated longing and relief. I know, she breathed, her voice barely a whisper. I've waited just as long. He gently cupped her face in his hands, his thumbs stroking her cheekbones. His gaze dropped to her lips, still swollen from their kiss, then swept over her face, drinking in every detail. You are more beautiful than I remember. And you, she countered, her voice trembling slightly, are even more dangerous. He chuckled, a low, pleased sound. Is that a warning? Or an invitation? Perhaps both, she murmured, a playful glint returning to her eyes. But tonight, I think I'm prepared for danger. He smiled, a slow, sensual curve of his lips that promised exquisite pleasures. Good, he said, his voice a silken thread of temptation. Because tonight, Elara, I intend to be very dangerous indeed. His hands slid down her back, drawing her even closer, until she could feel the heat of his body through the thin silk of her robe. He leaned in, his lips brushing against her ear, sending shivers down her spine. Lead the way, my velvet dream, he whispered, his breath warm against her skin. Show me where your dreams truly begin. She met his gaze, a silent understanding passing between them. With a gentle tug on his hand she turned, leading him deeper into the apartment, towards the softly lit sanctuary of her bedroom, where the velvet duvet awaited, promising a night of passions unfurling, a world where only their desires would dictate the rhythm. The jazz music continued its seductive melody, a soundtrack to their unfolding story, as the night outside deepened, holding its breath, waiting for the velvet dreams to truly begin. The soft glow from a bedside lamp, casting long dancing shadows, welcomed them into the room. It was an intimate space, a symphony of deep blues and silvers, with heavy drapes drawn against the city lights, ensuring their world was entirely their own. The air was subtly fragrant, a delicate blend of lavender and something warm, almost spicy, that was uniquely her. He felt the gentle pressure of her hand guiding him, her fingers interlacing with his, a silent invitation to step across the threshold of the familiar and into the realm of the deeply personal. Her bedroom was a haven, a sanctuary designed for dreams and desires. The velvet duvet, a rich, dark sapphire, indeed awaited, spread invitingly across a large, low-slung bed. A collection of diverse pillows, some plump and square, others oblong and silken, hinted at luxurious comfort. On a small antique chest beside the bed, a single unlit candle stood, its wick promising further warmth, further light, if they chose to ignite it. For now, the soft lamplight was enough, painting her features in hues of gold and shadow, making her eyes seem even deeper, more mysterious. She released his hand, turning fully to face him, her smile a soft curve that spoke volumes. The jazz, now a more distant murmur from the living room, became a heartbeat, a low thrum beneath the surface of their quiet anticipation. He watched her, captivated, as she reached up, her fingers deft, to unfasten the intricate clasp of the necklace she wore, a delicate silver chain that had rested just above her collarbones. As it came free, she laid it carefully on the dresser, a small, almost reverent act that signaled a shedding of the day, an unburdening. Then, her gaze met his again, a silent question, an unspoken permission. His own hands, almost instinctively, went to the lapels of his jacket. He unbuttoned it slowly, feeling the smooth fabric slide away from his shoulders. She watched, her eyes tracking the movement, a subtle shift in her posture, a slight tilt of her head, as if savoring the unraveling. He hung the jacket over the back of a plush armchair, then moved to unfasten his tie, pulling it gently from his neck. The silk, cool against his skin a moment before, now felt like an unnecessary barrier. He tossed it loosely beside his jacket. She mirrored his actions, though with a different grace. Her fingers went to the buttons of her blouse, pearl-like and small, tracing a path downwards. He found himself holding his breath, mesmerized by the slow reveal of the creamy skin beneath. Each button released was a soft, almost inaudible click, a punctuation mark in the silent conversation they were having. The fabric, a soft silk the color of dawn, parted, revealing the delicate lace of a camisole beneath, hinting at the curves it barely concealed. The scent of her perfume, subtle and intoxicating, grew stronger as her body was gradually unveiled. She slipped the blouse from her shoulders, letting it drift to the floor in a silken pool around her feet. She didn't stoop to pick it up, her focus entirely on him, her eyes dark and luminous in the dim light. The camisole, a whisper of lace, clung to her, hinting at the swell of her breasts, the gentle curve of her waist. She stood before him, bathed in the soft glow, a vision of understated allure. He felt a primal stir within him, a deep, resonant hum that had been building since their first meeting. He took a step closer, then another, until he was standing directly in front of her. His hands, with a tenderness that surprised even himself, reached out to cup her face. Her skin was impossibly soft, warm beneath his palms. Her eyes, wide and trusting, searched his, reflecting the desire he knew burned in his own. He leaned in, slowly, giving her every opportunity to pull away, but she only leaned into his touch. Her breath a soft sigh against his lips as they finally met. It was a tentative kiss at first, a brush of lips, a testing of the waters. Then, as if a dam had broken, it deepened. Her lips parted, inviting him in, and he accepted the unspoken invitation, his tongue tracing the delicate curve of her mouth, exploring the softness within. A low moan escaped her, a sound that vibrated through him, igniting a new kind of fire. His hands slid from her face, down her neck, tracing the line of her collarbone, then resting lightly on her shoulders. Her own hands, tentative at first, found their way to his chest. Her fingers splayed against the crisp cotton of his shirt, feeling the rapid beat of his heart beneath. The kiss deepened, becoming more urgent, more consuming, a silent declaration of all the unspoken desires that had simmered between them throughout the evening. He tasted the sweetness of her mouth, the subtle tang of wine, and something else, something uniquely hers, that made his head spin. When they finally broke apart, it was only for a moment, their foreheads resting against each other, breaths mingling, hearts hammering in unison. Her eyes were half closed, her lips swollen and glistening, a small, satisfied smile playing on them. "You taste incredible," she whispered, her voice husky, a mere breath against his ear. He chuckled softly, a low rumble in his chest. "And you, my dear, are intoxicating." He kissed her again, a lingering, tender kiss that spoke of promise and devotion. His hands moved from her shoulders slowly, deliberately down her arms, feeling the smooth skin beneath the lace of her camisole. He felt the tremor that ran through her as his fingers grazed her sides, his thumbs brushing lightly against the curve of her breasts. She arched into his touch, a silent invitation, her fingers tightening their grip on his shirt. He pulled back just enough to look into her eyes, a silent question in his gaze. She nodded, a subtle, almost imperceptible movement. He took that as his cue. With gentle grace he reached behind her, his fingers finding the delicate clasp of her camisole. It was a simple hook, and with a soft click, it came undone. The lace, no longer held in place, shimmered, threatening to fall. He paused, letting the moment hang in the air, the anticipation a tangible thing between them. Then, with exquisite slowness, he slid the straps from her shoulders, letting the garment fall, pooling around her waist, revealing the full, captivating beauty of her breasts. They were high and firm, tipped with dusky rose, framed by the lingering lace. He swallowed, his throat suddenly dry. Her gaze never left his, a deep, unwavering connection. He could see the vulnerability there, the trust and the matching hunger. He reached out, his hand trembling slightly, and cupped one breast, his thumb brushing over the sensitive peak. A gasp escaped her, a soft, involuntary sound of pure pleasure. Her body swayed into his, seeking more, needing more. He felt the rapid flutter of her heart beneath his palm, mirroring his own frantic rhythm. He bent his head, his lips finding the soft skin of her shoulder, tasting, teasing. He moved lower, trailing kisses along her collarbone, down the valley between her breasts, until his mouth finally found one exquisite peak. He suckled gently, teasingly, feeling her arch into him, her fingers tangling in his hair, holding him closer. A wave of pure, unadulterated sensation washed over him, a primal connection that transcended words. Her other hand moved, her fingers finding the buttons of his shirt. Slowly, deliberately, she began to unfasten them, her touch light, electric. He lifted his head, allowing her to continue her work, their eyes locked in a silent dance of desire. Each button she released felt like a liberation, a shedding of the last vestiges of the world outside this room. When the shirt was finally open, she pushed it gently from his shoulders, letting it fall to the floor beside her blouse. He stood before her, bare-chested, feeling the cool air on his skin. Then the sudden searing heat of her hands as they splayed across his chest, tracing the contours of his muscles, his ribs. Her touch was soft, yet firm, exploring, discovering. He shivered, not from cold, but from the intensity of her touch. "You're beautiful," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion, her eyes raking over his body with an appreciative gaze. He took her words in, feeling a warmth spread through him. He returned the compliment with his eyes, letting his gaze devour her, lingering on the curves of her body, the soft swell of her hips, the long, elegant lines of her legs, still encased in the silk of her skirt. He reached down, his fingers finding the waistband of her skirt. He felt her hold her breath as he slowly unzipped it, the sound a soft rasp in the quiet room. The fabric, no longer constrained, fell away from her hips, pooling around her ankles. She stepped out of it gracefully, her gaze never leaving his. She stood before him now in nothing but delicate lace panties, a whisper of fabric that left little to the imagination, yet somehow made her even more alluring. He reached for her again, pulling her close, the soft skin of her bare breasts pressing against his chest, sending shivers through them both. Their bodies aligned, a perfect fit. And he felt the familiar, exquisite ache of desire deepen within him. He buried his face in her hair, inhaling her scent, a heady mix of lavender spice and her own unique essence. "To the bed," she whispered, her voice barely audible, a plea and a command woven into one. He lifted her into his arms effortlessly, cradling her against him. She let out a small gasp of surprise, then wrapped her arms around his neck, her head resting on his shoulder. He carried her to the bed, the velvet duvet beckoning, a dark, plush landscape. He lowered her gently onto the mattress, her body sinking into the softness. He stood over her for a moment, his gaze drinking her in, before slowly, deliberately, shedding his own remaining clothes. His trousers, then his socks, until he stood before her as vulnerable and exposed as she was. He watched her eyes as they traveled over his body, a silent appreciation passing between them. Then he joined her on the bed, sinking into the velvet softness beside her. He leaned over, propping himself on an elbow, his gaze tracing the delicate curve of her jaw, the soft line of her lips. He kissed her then, a long, slow, tender kiss that promised everything. His hand found its way to her hip, tracing the curve of her body, then moving lower, teasingly, along the lace of her panties. She shivered, her breath catching in her throat. He felt the heat radiating from her skin, the subtle tremor that ran through her body. "Are you real?" she whispered, her eyes wide, glistening with unshed emotion. "This feels like a dream." "More real than anything," he murmured, his voice thick with emotion. "And it's only just beginning." His fingers slipped beneath the lace, teasing the delicate skin beneath, his touch light, exploratory. She arched into him, a soft moan escaping her lips. He felt the dampness, the readiness, and a surge of primal desire coursed through him. He leaned down, his lips brushing against hers, then trailing down her throat, along her collarbone to the soft swell of her breast. He kissed and licked, teasing, tasting, until she was breathless, writhing beneath him. Her hands were everywhere now, tracing the lines of his back, digging into the muscles of his shoulders, urging him closer, always closer. She gasped as his fingers found the most sensitive part of her, a soft, insistent pressure that sent sparks of pleasure radiating through her. Her hips began to move, instinctively, seeking the rhythm, the connection. He moved above her, settling between her legs, the hard warmth of his body pressing against her, a delicious friction that made them both groan. Their eyes met again, a deep, silent understanding passing between them, a shared acknowledgement of the journey they were about to embark upon. The jazz music, a distant, sultry saxophone, seemed to swell in the background, a perfect accompaniment to the rising symphony of their breaths, their heartbeats, the soft sounds of pleasure that were beginning to escape them. The world outside had faded entirely, leaving only the two of them, entwined in the soft glow of the lamp, on a velvet sea of desire. The night was young, and their story, just truly beginning to unfurl, promised a tapestry of interwoven sensations, emotions, and unspoken vows, as deep and boundless as the velvet dreams awaiting them. The velvet beneath them seemed to melt into a liquid expanse, cradling their forms as he shifted, his gaze, a smoldering ember, meeting hers. A silent question hung in the air, weighted with unspoken promises, with a yearning that had been quietly building between them for what felt like an eternity. Her own eyes, wide and luminous, reflected the incandescent desire that now burned fiercely within her, mirroring his in its intensity. The soft glow of the lamp painted their skin in hues of amber and rose, highlighting the delicate flush on her cheeks, the taut line of his jaw. His hand, which had been resting lightly on her hip, now moved with a deliberate slowness, tracing the curve of her waist, the delicate indentation of her spine, before finding the soft swell of her breath. A gasp, barely audible, escaped her lips as his thumb brushed against the taut peak, sending a delicious shiver spiraling through her, a tremor that echoed deep in her core. The scent of him, a warm, musky fragrance mingled with the faint sweetness of wine and the crispness of the night air, enveloped her, intoxicating her senses, drawing her further into his orbit. She inhaled deeply, wanting to absorb every molecule of him, to make his essence part of her own. Her fingers, equally emboldened, tangled in the silken strands of his hair, a soft texture against her fingertips, pulling him closer, her lips parting slightly in an unspoken invitation. When their mouths met again, it was with a renewed urgency, a deeper hunger. His kiss was a slow, consuming fire, exploring every curve and hollow of her mouth, tasting her essence, a blend of honey and wild desire. She met him with equal fervor, her body arching into his, seeking the warmth, the pressure, the undeniable connection that hummed between them. His tongue dueled playfully with hers, then deepened, a tender invasion that left her breathless, her mind reeling with the sheer intensity of the moment. She felt a delicious weakness spread through her limbs, a surrender she hadn't known she craved until now. The remaining wisps of clothing felt like an unnecessary barrier, a whisper of the world they had just shed. With a tender grace, his hands moved to the delicate straps of her silk chemise, his fingers brushing her skin as he eased them down her shoulders. The fabric pooled around her waist, a shimmering cascade of ivory, revealing the soft expanse of her chest, the gentle rise and fall of her breath. He paused, his eyes tracing the delicate line of her collarbone, the pulse fluttering at the base of her throat, a silent adoration in their depths. She, in turn, found the buttons of his shirt, each undoing a small act of devotion, her fingertips grazing the warm skin beneath, feeling the strong beat of his heart against her palm, a powerful, reassuring rhythm that resonated with her own. As the last button gave way, she pushed the fabric from his shoulders, revealing the broad, sculpted expanse of his chest, the taut muscles of his arms, the faint dusting of dark hair that tapered to his waist. A thrill coursed through her at the sight of him, so powerful, so utterly male. The revelation of bare skin was a silent symphony, a landscape waiting to be explored. His eyes, dark with admiration, devoured the sight of her, a soft flush rising on her cheeks under his intense gaze. He kissed her shoulder, then the hollow of her throat, each touch a deliberate caress, a journey mapping the terrain of her body. His lips trailed lower, a warm, moist path leading down her collarbone, to the valley between her breasts, eliciting soft moans that vibrated deep within her chest. She arched her back, offering herself more fully to his exquisite ministrations, her fingers clutching his shoulders, holding on as if to anchor herself against the delicious tide of sensation. His breath was warm against her skin, each exhalation a soft caress that prickled her nerves, heightening her anticipation. The rhythm of their breathing became one, a shared cadence of rising passion. His hands roamed freely, learning the contours of her body, the softness of her skin, the subtle tremors that rippled through her at his touch. He cupped her breast, his thumbs circling the aroused peak, a tender torment that sent shards of pleasure through her. She gasped, her head falling back against the velvet, her eyes fluttering closed as she surrendered to the exquisite sensations. She, emboldened by his tenderness and her own burgeoning desire, pressed herself closer, feeling the hard planes of his chest against her softness, the strong column of his thighs against hers. A deep, primal ache began to bloom within her, a yearning for complete union, a desire to lose herself in the exquisite sensation of him. Their eyes would meet frequently, moments of profound understanding passing between them without a single word. It was a silent conversation of souls, acknowledging the depth of what was unfolding, a recognition of a connection that transcended the purely physical. Trust, vulnerability, and an overwhelming sense of belonging woven into every touch, every kiss. He murmured her name, a husky whisper against her ear, and the sound resonated through her, a sacred melody that spoke volumes. She responded with a soft sigh, her hand tracing the strong line of his jaw, feeling the slight stubble beneath her fingertips, a delicious contrast to the softness of his lips. He shifted, rising slightly above her, his weight supported on his elbows, allowing his gaze to sweep over her once more. His eyes lingered on her lips, swollen from his kisses, on her breasts, rising and falling with her quickened breath, on the gentle curve of her stomach. There was reverence in his gaze, an unspoken promise of worship that made her feel cherished, beautiful, utterly desired. He leaned down, his lips brushing against hers, a whisper-soft touch that promised more, much more. "You are exquisite," he murmured, his voice thick with emotion, sending a fresh wave of heat through her. Her response was a soft whimper, her fingers threading through his hair once more, pulling him back down for another kiss, deeper, more demanding than before. She wanted to consume him, to be consumed by him. The world outside the soft glow of their lamp had ceased to exist, replaced by a universe of two, where every sensation was amplified, every touch electric. The velvet bed became their private ocean, each undulation of their bodies a wave carrying them further out to sea, away from all shores, all constraints. His hand drifted lower, tracing the delicate curve of her hip, then the soft inner thigh, a path that sent shivers of anticipation dancing along her skin. She tensed for a moment, a delicious apprehension, before relaxing into his touch, trusting him implicitly. His touch was both gentle and firm, exploring the secret valleys and peaks of her body with a reverence that melted any lingering inhibitions. A soft moan escaped her as his fingers found the sensitive skin there, a light, teasing caress that made her arch into his hand, silently pleading for more. The deep ache within her intensified, a sweet, insistent throb that demanded release. He moved above her, a magnificent shadow against the soft light, and she opened to him, not just physically, but with every fiber of her being. Her legs instinctively parted, inviting him closer, her hands reaching out to draw him in. A soft cry escaped her as their bodies finally aligned, a perfect fit forged in the crucible of desire. The world narrowed to this single point of contact, this exquisite pressure, this undeniable belonging. He paused, looking into her eyes, a question, a plea, a promise shining in his depths. She met his gaze, her own eyes brimming with an unspoken yes, a complete and utter surrender. He began to move, slowly at first, a gentle rhythm that quickly deepened, becoming more insistent, more primal. They moved together, a primal dance as old as time, each thrust, each sway, a testament to the surging passion that consumed them. The velvet bed became a tempestuous sea, their bodies the only anchors, rising and falling on waves of pure sensation. Her nails lightly scored his back, his breath ragged against her ear, as they chased the precipice of pleasure, utterly lost in the rhythm of their shared ecstasy. The sounds of their passion filled the room, soft moans, gasps, the rhythmic creak of the bed, the whispered endearments that were more felt than heard. It was a symphony of surrender, a crescendo of pure, unadulterated sensation. The tension built, a glorious, almost unbearable pressure, coiling tighter and tighter within her. Her body arched, straining against his, seeking the ultimate release. He matched her intensity, his movements becoming more urgent, more powerful, his face etched with a beautiful blend of passion and tenderness. He lowered his head, pressing soft kisses to her neck, her shoulder, her lips, murmuring incoherent words of adoration, pushing them both higher, further. Then, the world shattered. A wave of pure, incandescent pleasure crashed over her, consuming her utterly, drawing a choked cry from her lips. Her muscles contracted around him, holding him fast as the climax rippled through her, 1,000 tiny explosions of sensation. She felt him follow, a deep groan escaping his chest as he buried his face in her hair, his body shaking with the force of his own release. For a long, breathless moment, they were utterly suspended, two souls intertwined, floating in the boundless sea of their shared ecstasy. The world, momentarily shattered into a million glittering fragments, slowly began to reform around them, but irrevocably changed. He collapsed against her, his weight a comforting pressure, his breath warm on her neck. Her arms instinctively wrapped around him, holding him close, feeling the steady thrum of his heart against hers. The silence that followed was not empty, but rich with unspoken words, with the echo of their shared release. Their bodies, slick with exertion, pressed together, a sweet, lingering warmth radiating between them. He stirred, lifting his head to gaze into her eyes, a soft smile playing on his lips, a silent question in his depths. His eyes, still dark with passion, held a tenderness that made her heart ache in the most exquisite way. She returned his smile, a warmth spreading through her that was far deeper than mere physical satisfaction. It was a warmth of connection, of belonging, of having found a profound solace in his arms. She traced the line of his jaw with her thumb, feeling the faint stubble, the strong bone structure beneath. He shifted slightly, easing his weight, but not breaking the intimacy of their embrace. He kissed her forehead, a soft, lingering touch that spoke volumes of affection. "Are you all right?" he whispered, his voice still a little hoarse, his concern a balm to her senses. "More than all right," she murmured back, her voice equally soft, almost a purr. She nestled closer, inhaling his scent, now mingled with the fresh, intoxicating aroma of their lovemaking. It was a scent she knew she would forever associate with this night, with him. She felt utterly cherished, completely safe, and wonderfully, gloriously alive. He chuckled softly, a low rumble in his chest that vibrated through her. "Good," he said. And then he pulled the velvet throw up over them, a gentle gesture that cocooned them in warmth and privacy. The lamp still cast its soft glow, but now it felt more like a guardian, watching over their peaceful repose. They lay for a long time, simply holding each other, the quiet intimacy a powerful continuation of their passion. Her hand rested on his chest, feeling the steady beat of his heart, a rhythm that had now found perfect harmony with her own. She felt the subtle shift of his muscles beneath her palm, the lingering warmth of his skin. Every fiber of her being felt sated, yet a new kind of hunger, a hunger for this closeness, this connection, had awakened within her. He began to trace patterns on her back with his fingertips, light hypnotic strokes that sent gentle shivers through her. She closed her eyes, allowing herself to drift, half asleep, half awake, in the blissful aftermath. But even as the initial storm subsided, a gentle current of desire still rippled beneath the surface, promising more. The world had been transformed, their private universe now richer, deeper, filled with a magic she hadn't known existed. After a while, he stirred again, pushing himself up slightly, propping himself on an elbow to look down at her. His gaze was tender, searching, filled with a quiet wonder. He reached out, brushing a stray strand of hair from her face, his fingers lingering on her cheek. I can't remember feeling like this," he confessed, his voice barely a whisper, a raw honesty in his tone. Her heart swelled. She reached up, cupping his face in her hand, her thumb stroking his jawline. "Me neither," she admitted, her voice thick with emotion. The vulnerability in his eyes met the vulnerability in hers, forging an even deeper bond between them. It was more than just physical pleasure, it was a profound emotional resonance, a feeling of having found a missing piece of herself. He leaned down, kissing her softly. A slow, tender kiss that tasted of lingering passion and fresh promises. This kiss was different from the others. It was less about hunger and more about affection, about a newfound tenderness. It was a kiss that sealed their connection, a silent vow exchanged between them. He then shifted, pulling her closer still, until her head was resting comfortably on his shoulder, her body spooned against his. His arm wrapped around her, holding her securely against him, as if he never wanted to let her go. She felt the strong, reassuring curve of his arm around her waist, the warmth of his skin against her back. The sensation was utterly comforting, utterly perfect. "Sleep," he whispered against her hair, his voice a soft lullaby. "Or don't. The night is still ours." She smiled, a soft, contented sigh escaping her lips. The world outside had long faded, replaced by the intimate cocoon of their shared space. The velvet dreams awaiting them were no longer just a metaphor for desire, but a tangible reality, woven from passion, tenderness, and an undeniable blossoming love. She felt a peaceful contentment settle over her, deeper and more profound than any she had known. The night was young, and their story, just truly beginning to unfurl, promised a tapestry of interwoven sensations, emotions, and unspoken vows, as deep and boundless as the velvet dreams awaiting them. And as she drifted, not quite into sleep, but into a liminal space of exquisite contentment, she knew, with a certainty that resonated through her very soul, that this was only the beginning. The soft glow of the lamp flickered gently, casting dancing shadows on the walls, a silent witness to the unfolding beauty of their night. He pressed a final, tender kiss to her temple, and she felt herself relax completely, utterly safe, utterly loved, in the strong, warm embrace of the man beside her. The night stretched before them, a canvas awaiting new strokes of passion, new hues of intimacy. His lips, warm and soft, lingered on her temple for a moment longer, a silent promise. Then, with a gentle shift, they trailed down the curve of her cheek, a feather-light touch that sent a shiver of delicious anticipation through her. She turned her head slightly, inviting him, and his mouth found hers again, this time with a deeper, more knowing pressure. It wasn't the hesitant, exploring kiss from earlier. This was a kiss of arrival, of shared understanding, of a hunger that had been simmering beneath the surface all evening, now ready to be acknowledged. Her fingers, which had been resting lightly on his arm, now curled around his neck, tangling in the soft hair at his nape. She felt the ripple of muscles beneath her touch, the warmth of his skin against hers, and a soft moan escaped her lips, swallowed by his. His tongue sought hers, a tender dance that spoke of a burgeoning intimacy, a silent conversation of desire. She leaned into him, her body instinctively molding itself against his, feeling the delicious press of his chest against her breasts, the long line of his thigh against hers. The air in the room seemed to hum with a newfound energy, charged with unspoken longing. The soft glow of the lamp painted their forms in shades of amber and shadow, creating a private world where only their sensations mattered. His hand, which had been resting on her back, began a slow, deliberate journey downwards, tracing the delicate curve of her spine, sending sparks of sensation in its wake. She arched into his touch, her breath catching in her throat as his fingers dipped lower, resting just above the swell of her hip. He broke the kiss, a soft gasp escaping her as he pulled back just enough to gaze into her eyes, dark and luminous in the dim light. "Beautiful," he murmured, his voice a low, husky whisper that vibrated through her very core. His thumb stroked her cheekbone, a tender gesture that belied the burning intensity in his gaze. She saw a reflection of her own yearning there, a mirror of the passion that was now undeniably alight between them. With a gentle shift he began to move, his body pressing closer, his leg insinuating itself between hers. The friction was exquisite, a slow, deliberate tease that made her muscles clench with a sweet ache. Her breath came in short, shallow gasps as his lips descended again, not to her mouth this time, but to the sensitive skin just beneath her ear, then along her jawline, leaving a trail of fire in their wake. She tilted her head back, offering him more access, her throat exposed and vulnerable, a silent invitation. His kisses were light, teasing, yet utterly possessive, like a painter adding the first delicate strokes to a masterpiece. He tasted of warmth and a subtle, intoxicating scent that was uniquely him, a scent that was now inextricably linked with safety and desire. When his lips reached the hollow of her throat, she shivered, a delicious tremor that shook her from head to toe. His hand, still at her hip, now moved with a new purpose, slipping beneath the hem of her silk nightgown. The cool silk shifted, then gathered, as his fingers grazed the bare skin of her thigh. Her breath hitched. The touch was gentle, yet it held a promise of so much more. She felt a flush spread across her skin, a warmth that was both internal and external. His fingers moved slowly, deliberately, upward, pushing the silk higher, until the soft fabric was bunched around her waist. Her skin tingled where he touched her, and a delicious vulnerability settled over her. He pulled back slightly, his eyes still locked with hers. A question? A plea? A silent permission? She responded with a soft nod, her eyes shining with unshed desire. He smiled then, a slow, tender curve of his lips that sent a fresh wave of heat through her. It was a smile of understanding, of shared anticipation, of a journey they were about to embark on together. With exquisite slowness he reached for the delicate straps of her nightgown. His fingers brushed against her collarbone, then slid over her shoulders, pushing the silk down. She helped him, lifting her arms slightly as the fabric pooled around her waist, then fell away, leaving her bare to the waist. A small gasp escaped her as the cool air of the room touched her skin, followed almost immediately by the warmth of his gaze. He took a moment, his eyes sweeping over her, not with hunger, but with reverence, an appreciation that made her feel beautiful, cherished. She felt a blush creep up her chest, but it was a blush of pleasure, not embarrassment. She met his gaze, her own eyes alight with a reciprocal wonder. Then his hands were on her, not demanding, but exploring. His palms cupped her breasts, gently, reverently, his thumbs brushing lightly over their peaks. A jolt, electric and profound, shot through her. Her nipples hardened instantly, aching for more. She gasped, her head falling back against the pillows, her eyes closing as she savored the exquisite sensation. He leaned in, his mouth seeking her neck again, trailing wet, open-mouthed kisses along her collarbone, down the valley between her breasts. His touch was a symphony of sensations, the warmth of his breath, the soft brush of his beard-stubbled chin, the gentle pressure of his lips. Each movement was a deliberate stroke on the canvas of her desire, painting her skin with heat and longing. "You are breathtaking," he whispered against her skin, his voice thick with emotion. "Absolutely breathtaking." She reached for him, her hands finding the buttons of his shirt. He understood, and with a soft chuckle, he helped her, his eyes never leaving hers. Slowly, button by button, she unfastened his shirt, her fingers brushing against the warm skin of his chest, feeling the tautness of his muscles beneath. When the last button was undone, she pushed the fabric back from his shoulders, revealing the strong, sculpted lines of his chest, dusted with dark hair. She leaned in, pressing her cheek against his chest, inhaling his scent. A clean, masculine aroma mingled with the subtle hint of his cologne. His heart beat a steady rhythm beneath her ear, a comforting counterpoint to her own racing pulse. She felt utterly safe, utterly cherished, in his arms. His hands continued their gentle exploration, moving from her breasts to her waist, then lower, pushing the remaining silk nightgown away entirely. It slid down her legs, a soft whisper against the sheets, landing in a silken pool at the foot of the bed. Now, they were truly skin to skin, the warmth of their bodies mingling, creating an electric field of sensation. He shifted, rising slightly above her, supporting himself on his elbows, gazing down at her with an intensity that made her tremble. His eyes, dark and fathomless, drank her in, and she felt a delicious surrender bloom within her. Her hands moved over his shoulders, down his back, reveling in the hard planes of his muscles, the smooth warmth of his skin. His lips found hers again, a kiss that was both tender and hungry, a slow, deep exploration that left her breathless and yearning for more. His body pressed intimately against hers, the hard ridge of his desire a potent reminder of where this journey was leading. She moaned into his mouth, arching her hips slightly, instinctively seeking the connection she craved. He responded instantly, his hips pressing down a slow, tantalizing rock that sent waves of pleasure through her. He broke the kiss, trailing a path of fire down her throat, across her collarbone, until he reached her breasts again. This time, his mouth closed over one aching peak, drawing her in with a soft suction that made her cry out. A profound shiver ran through her, as his tongue flickered over her nipple, then gently suckled, sending currents of pure sensation directly to the core of her being. She tangled her fingers in his hair, holding him closer, her body vibrating with a pleasure so intense it bordered on pain. He alternated between her breasts, lavishing attention on each, driving her further and further into a state of exquisite arousal. Her legs parted in unconscious invitation, and he responded by settling between them, his body a warm, heavy weight against hers. His hand, which had been caressing her hip, now moved lower, tracing the delicate curve of her inner thigh, inching closer and closer to the heart of her desire. Each touch was a deliberate, agonizingly slow tease, building the tension to an almost unbearable pitch. When his fingers finally found her, she gasped, her body arching off the bed. His touch was reverent, gentle, yet utterly devastating. He explored her, slowly, tenderly, feeling the soft folds, the delicate dampness, the rising heat. She felt herself open to him completely, a flower unfurling its petals to the sun. His thumb brushed against the most sensitive part of her, and a jolt of pure pleasure shot through her, making her cry out his name, a soft, choked sound. He leaned down, kissing her deeply, swallowing her moans, his fingers continuing their exquisite work. The world outside the bedroom ceased to exist. There was only the rhythm of their breathing, the whisper of the sheets, the electric hum of their shared desire. He moved with a primal grace, his body a symphony of strength and tenderness. She felt herself spiraling, rising higher and higher on waves of sensation, her body trembling, her mind a beautiful haze of pure feeling. His breath was ragged against her ear as he whispered assurances, endearments, words that were lost in the roar of blood in her ears, but whose meaning was clear in the intensity of his touch. Then he shifted, positioning himself, and she felt the warm, blunt press of him against her entrance. Her hips lifted instinctively, an unspoken plea. He paused, looking into her eyes, a question in his gaze. She nodded, her eyes shining with desperate longing, her lips parted in anticipation. Slowly, deliberately, he began to enter her. It was a sensation of exquisite fullness, of stretching, of becoming utterly complete. She gasped, a sound of pure wonder and relief as he filled her, slowly, inch by precious inch. Her body welcomed him, molded itself around him, a perfect fit. When he was fully within her, he paused, allowing them both to adjust, to savor the profound intimacy of their union. Their eyes met, a silent language passing between them. A promise, a revelation, a shared destiny. A tear, unbidden, escaped the corner of her eye, a tear of overwhelming emotion, of pure joy. Then, he began to move. Slowly at first, a gentle rock, a deep, sensual rhythm that resonated through her very soul. She wrapped her legs around his waist, pulling him closer, wanting to feel every inch of him, every pulse of his magnificent body. Their breaths mingled, ragged and hurried, their bodies moving in ancient synchronicity. The lamp on the bedside table cast long dancing shadows on the wall, witnesses to their unfolding passion. The bed springs creaked softly, a gentle accompaniment to their lovemaking. She closed her eyes, surrendering to the overwhelming sensations, allowing herself to be carried away on the tide of pleasure he was creating within her. He increased the pace, his thrusts becoming deeper, more urgent, yet always with a lingering tenderness that protected her heart, even as he claimed her body. She met his rhythm, pushing up to meet him, her hips arching, her nails lightly scratching his back. Each stroke sent a jolt of pure pleasure through her, building, an unstoppable force. Her climax came suddenly, explosively, a wave of pure, unadulterated sensation that crashed over her, leaving her trembling and gasping for breath. Her body convulsed around him, squeezing him, drawing a low groan from deep within his chest. She cried out, her voice raw with ecstasy, her entire being vibrating with the aftermath of her release. He continued to thrust, deeper, harder, his own climax building quickly on the heels of hers. He buried his face in her neck, gritting his teeth, his muscles straining, his body quivering with effort. With a final powerful thrust, he cried out her name, his own release echoing hers, a guttural primal sound of ultimate pleasure. He collapsed onto her, his weight heavy but welcome, his body slick with sweat, his breath ragged against her ear. She held him tightly, her arms wrapped around his shoulders, her fingers buried in his damp hair. Their hearts hammered against each other, a frantic duet slowly beginning to calm. They lay there for a long time, entangled, intertwined, the silence broken only by their ragged breathing. The air in the room was thick with the scent of their lovemaking, a musk of passion and contentment. She felt utterly sated, utterly loved, a profound sense of peace settling over her. He stirred first, lifting his head slightly, his eyes still closed. He pressed a soft, lingering kiss to her temple, then her forehead, then her lips, a series of gentle affirmations. "Remarkable," he whispered, his voice still thick with emotion, but laced with a profound tenderness. She smiled, a soft, contented smile. "You too," she managed, her voice a husky whisper. He shifted, pulling back slightly, but still keeping her close, one arm wrapped around her waist, his hand resting on her hip. He gazed at her, his eyes warm and adoring, and she felt a fresh wave of love swell within her. It wasn't just physical. It was emotional, spiritual. This man had touched her soul, ignited a fire she hadn't known lay dormant within her. "I could stay like this forever," he murmured, his fingers gently tracing the curve of her hip. "Me too," she agreed, snuggling closer, burying her face in the crook of his neck. The scent of him, now mingled with the scent of their passion, was intoxicating, comforting. The night, however, was still young, and the earlier promise of new strokes of passion, new hues of intimacy began to stir again. As their breathing regulated, and the initial exhaustion began to wane, a new, softer desire started to awaken. This time, it was less urgent, more languid, a desire for prolonged connection, for deeper exploration. His hand, which had been resting on her hip, now began a slow, sensual journey up her side, over her ribs, until it cupped her breast again. His thumb brushed over her nipple, and she felt a familiar spark ignite, a subtle ache that was different from before, softer, more persistent. She shifted, turning slightly to face him more fully, her leg tangling with his. Her hand found his chest, her fingers tracing the patterns of hair, feeling the steady beat of his heart. She leaned in, pressing a soft kiss to his shoulder, then to the hollow of his throat. Again? She whispered, her voice barely audible, a hopeful question. He chuckled softly, a warm rumble in his chest. Only if you insist, he teased, though his eyes, dark and heavy-lidded, already betrayed his own renewed desire. He pulled her closer, his lips finding hers in a tender, knowing kiss. The second time was different. It was slower, more deliberate, an unhurried dance of discovery. They moved with a newfound understanding, anticipating each other's needs, their bodies already attuned to the subtle language of touch and breath. His kisses were deeper, more prolonged, exploring every curve of her mouth, every sensitive spot on her neck and shoulders. His hands roamed over her body with a gentle possessiveness, lingering on her breasts, her stomach, the soft curve of her inner thighs. She responded with equal fervor, her fingers tracing the hard planes of his back, the strong line of his arms, feeling the ripple of muscles beneath her touch. They whispered soft endearments to each other, words of love and longing, filling the quiet room with the sound of their devotion. He entered her slowly again, but this time it felt even more profound, a deep, soulful merging that transcended the physical. Their gazes were locked, their eyes communicating a depth of feeling that words could never capture. Each thrust was a deliberate act of love, each withdrawal a gentle tease. The rhythm was a slow, hypnotic sway, building a different kind of intensity, a deeper, more sustained pleasure. She felt herself rising again, not with the explosive rush of before, but with a slow, building wave that crested and broke in a prolonged, exquisite shudder. Her body tightened around him, drawing him in deeper as she rode the wave of her second climax. A softer, more pervasive sensation that left her feeling utterly suffused with warmth and contentment. He followed her, his own release a deep, guttural moan that echoed hers, his body trembling as he buried his face in her hair. This time the afterglow was even more profound, a sense of peace and belonging that settled deep within her soul. They lay intertwined, their limbs tangled, their bodies pressed together in a perfect embrace. The lamp, which had been a silent witness to their passion, now seemed to cast a softer, more benevolent glow. The shadows on the walls danced with a quieter grace. The night, once a canvas awaiting strokes of passion, was now filled with vibrant hues, painted with the brushstrokes of their shared intimacy. Eventually, sleep began to claim them. He pulled the soft duvet higher, tucking it around their naked bodies, protecting them from the faint chill of the late-night air. She nestled against him, her head tucked under his chin, listening to the steady beat of his heart, feeling the warmth of his body enveloping hers. His arm tightened around her, a comforting weight, a silent promise of protection and love. She felt utterly safe, utterly loved, utterly content. The world outside their bedroom, with its demands and its stresses, faded into oblivion. There was only the warmth of his skin against hers, the comforting rhythm of his breathing, the profound sense of peace that settled over her, like a soft blanket. She drifted off to sleep, a gentle smile playing on her lips, her dreams already filled with the echoes of his touch, the memory of his kisses. When she woke, the room was bathed in the soft, diffused light of early morning. The lamp had been turned off, and a gentle golden glow filtered through the curtains, painting the room in hues of cream and rose. She stirred, feeling the comforting weight of his arm still around her, the warmth of his body spooned against hers. She turned slightly, her eyes fluttering open, to find him already awake, gazing at her with a gentle, sleepy smile. His hair was disheveled, his eyes soft and warm, and she felt a fresh surge of affection, a tenderness that was different from the passion of the night, but just as profound. "Good morning," he whispered, his voice still thick with sleep, a low, husky sound that sent a shiver of pleasure through her. "Good morning," she replied, her voice equally soft, a smile spreading across her face. He leaned in, pressing a soft, lingering kiss to her lips. It was a kiss of morning, of quiet contentment, of a shared intimacy that had deepened profoundly overnight. There was no urgency, only tenderness, a gentle affirmation of the bond they had forged. She ran her hand over his chest, feeling the smooth warmth of his skin, the gentle rise and fall of his breath. "I slept so well," she murmured, a truth that resonated deeply within her. It had been more than just physical rest, it had been a rest for her soul. He chuckled, pulling her closer. "Me too. The best sleep I've had in years." He paused, his gaze thoughtful. "Last night, it was everything I could have imagined and more." She met his gaze, her heart swelling with emotion. "It was perfect," she agreed, her voice barely a whisper. "More than perfect." They lay there for a while longer, simply basking in the quiet intimacy of the morning, the warmth of their bodies intertwined, the soft light of dawn painting their skin. There was no need for words, only the comfortable silence of two souls deeply connected, profoundly satisfied. Eventually the world outside would intrude. Responsibilities would call, the day would begin. But for now, in the soft glow of the morning, wrapped in his arms, she knew that something truly precious had been born in the quiet hours of the night. It was a connection that transcended fleeting moments, a love that promised to deepen with every passing day. As the sun climbed higher, casting longer, brighter rays into the room, she knew, with an unshakable certainty, that this beautiful, passionate journey they had embarked upon was only just beginning. And with him by her side, she was ready for every new stroke, every new hue that life and love had to offer.